Ryan here, Australian boxing writer, all-round thrill seeker, jack of all trades, master of none, whatever superlative you want to use to describe me. Welcoming you to my brand new YouTube channel, The Journeyman. Here I'm going to be bringing you opinion, analysis, interviews, ringside highlights where I can, behind the scenes glimpses and all the good stuff that you expect from a halfway decent channel, I guess. I want to kick it off today, firstly, if you may notice there's a brick wall behind me. I'm kicking it off on my porch. Suffice to say that it's a much safer place to videocast, podcast, whatever you want to call this, than inside my own home when there's a 2-year-old asleep. She wakes up now with 25 minutes of sleep under her belt and she'll be screaming blue murder all night. So here I am, right next to a residential street. So much safer place to do this, but going to kick it off in style, going to kick it off like I always do, a bit of opinion, bit of analysis, but mainly speaking from the heart, and that's about the upcoming Australian super welterweight title fight on Saturday night, 14th of September, from 2 days from now, from time of recording, between Dan the Engine Hill, former champion, and Louis Kid Lightning Chadwick, a fast up-and-comer from Queensland. I love this fight, and it speaks to this new sort of generation of Australian boxing where guys aren't too careful about their records. I mean, look at these two guys. They've both laid it on the line against other rising prospects. For Dan Hill, he put his title on the line against Dylan Biggs and came up short. For Chadwick, he took a fight in Joel Pavlidis' hometown and came up short himself. But the reality is these are two guys who are indicative of this new wave where, we're not too careful about who we fight. We take on the best challengers. I use a collective we like I've ever fought, but you get my point. These are guys who are just willing to test themselves locally, but get the biggest amount of eyeballs on it because they're fighting other guys who are highly regarded. For Dan Hill, his whole record is indicative of this. He's 7-1 as a professional, but his combined record for his opponents, like their combined records, including Chadwick, coming up at 48-3-1. That's unheard of for a guy with less than 10 fights. Often there's an imported guy with a subpar record who's brought in to fight, so you can work out a new wrinkle, or you're fighting another person who's come from another sport. And Dan is that guy, but Dan is taken to boxing like a duck to water. And for Chadwick, he had that big win in his last one against Ben Horn, and he's up and coming. He's showing new wrinkles every time out. He's growing into a really nice professional style, and he picked up that IBO regional title. Now, say what you want about that IBO regional title, the Asia Orient or the Oriental Pacific title. I forget the name of it. It's sort of not within the greater pantheon of belts, but it has been a launching point for a lot of pretty good fighters on the Australian scene. So I guess that's the big thing for me in this fight. Now, it's going to be going up against the major footy codes who have their finals on. For me as an AFL fan, Brisbane and GWS looks to be a cracking game on Saturday night. But I think my eye's going to be on the boxing solely for this fight once Bub goes to bed. As you hear a car go past there, g'day, how are you? I guess for me, and we sort of get caught up in the spectacle of the No Limit shows, which have been the last one in particular, a fantastic night with something for everyone. And headlining that was Nikita Tszyu, who's the man who vacated this title that Chadwick and Hill will fight for, having that absolute bloodbath with Cohen Mazudia. And Cohen himself has had some great fights. Obviously Wade Ryan's there as well, but then the Don of the division, Tim Tszyu, fighting for a world title in October as well over in Florida. So these guys like Chadwick and Hill, who are rising in their own right, but not necessarily the biggest in terms of their star power, their crossover sort of power into the mainstream of Australian sport, are sort of left behind in that sense. And it's not really the reason why I'm doing this video, but I guess it plays a little bit of a role. These are two guys who are ready to take the next step into that regional sort of title level, similar, akin to Nikita Tszyu in his last one. So that's sort of where it is for me. But the other thing about it is it's an incredible clash of styles. You look at a guy like Dan Hill, who has come over from the MMA space, but uses his greatest weapon to his advantage every single time out, and that's his cardio. Doesn't get a nickname the Engine lightly, and you've only got to look back at his last fight with Taekyung Kim, the South Korean boy who trains with Brendan Smith up there in Toowoomba. But I watched that fight, and there were multiple rounds in a row, and I sat there and counted. I went back and I watched it and I counted where he threw over 100 punches and still came out the fresher man and stopped Kim late. To be able to put that volume on fighters so late in fights, but consistently, repetitively do it it's bloody staggering. Like his cardio is renowned. There aren't many fighters on the scene who have that kind of cardio. And the other thing about him is he's got a chin. I've spoken to a fighter who he fought on his record. I'm not sure if they wanted this to go on the record or not, so I'll leave their name out. But he told me he hit Dan with a pretty decent straight in their fight, and it sort of hit him right in the eyeball. But rather than sort of L-step, reset, and sort of blink it out and go again, Dan just kept walking into the combination that he had and shut his eye until he thought it was right to open again, and then went. It's just remarkably tough. Sometimes guys like that are too tough for their own good, but I mean, Dan just keeps winning fights. He just keeps doing it, just keeps putting the pressure on and keeps getting the job done. So, I mean, that's sort of him in a nutshell. But I mean, a lot of those Nitro Box guys, with Blair Studley in the team there, Isaac Harbin's another one. Once they establish mid-range, they let their hands go. And they do it pretty early. I think we saw Floyd Masson, who's now training there, in his last fight with Joshua Francis, do the same. Once Floyd had got his distance right and he felt there wasn't really much of a sort of threat coming back, Floyd teed off and he mixed it to the body, mixed it to the head. I think that could be a key weapon for Dan in this fight. On the other side, though, we see Louis Chadwick, who's starting to really grow into himself as a professional. After sort of coming up on the Ace shows to now be a headliner, and obviously he had a really big fight with Ben Horn in the first installment of the Premier Boxing Series. But for him, I see a guy who's incredibly tall for the division, but carries a nice little bit of pop in his punch, who could really exploit that sort of move forward style of Hill and really snipe like he did against Ben Horn. And Ben's another fighter who fights in a similar sort of fashion. Wouldn't say reckless abandon, but he's willing to trade and wear a few punches in order to land one. So it's a great sort of style clash in the sense that it should guarantee action for the 10 rounds that it's meant to go. There's a great undercard underneath it as well, and it sounds like I'm promoting, but there's a couple of prospects on that show. Ethan Law's back after a 2.5 year absence, and then you've also got Nathan Watson, who's sort of traded wins and losses, but looks to be a decent sort of fighter out of Northern Ireland. And then a whole host of other guys who are looking to sort of do a similar thing to these two guys, but these two guys in the main event, I should say, sorry, but no one sort of typifies that new attitude of let's just throw caution to the wind, and hey, if we do take a loss, well, it's not the end of the world. There's more fights out there, and it doesn't have to necessarily be in Australia. You can tour through the Asia sort of Pacific area and get fights. I think a great example of this is just recently, and it might be recency bias from me, but Alex Winwood's world title fight this weekend against knockout CP Freshmart. That was Alex's 5th fight, and he's going for a world title. Staggering, but it's not a loss that's going to dent him. It's a pretty shallow division, a lot shallower than 154 super welterweight for these two guys, but by the same token, one loss doesn't define him, and he'll bounce back. He's got a great team behind him in Angelo Hyder and Tony Tolsh, who'll plan and sort of work their way out to get back to that sort of level. But I mean, not all hope is lost. These two guys, as I've sort of mentioned, both have those losses. So, and they're jumping straight back in to take the chance. So, what I will say about this fight and why I love it, I think, is it's as simple as that of what I've just sort of laid out. It's two guys who have the chance now. They've gone back after their losses. They've re-established, and now they have the chance to go back and take that next step. And I'm certainly looking forward to it. I think all footy fans out there who even if your team's playing, have a secondary screen going, and just keep an eye on this. I think we're going to get a lot of answers about this sort of deep super welterweight division come Saturday night. So that's sort of where I'll leave it. Just a little quick hitter, but sort of things to think about going into this one. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up, leave a comment. Tell me what you think I can do better on these sort of things. I love putting content out there. I love talking about boxing. So just talking to my phone like this on my porch isn't the worst thing in the world for me to do. I find it quite cathartic. So if there's anything you'd like me to do better or like to touch on, leave a comment, engage and I'll see what I can do. But apart from that, guys, enjoy the fights, enjoy Saturday night, whether your footy team's playing or not. Watch that boxing. Enjoy. Have a good one, guys. Stay safe.